Hi, hello again and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope you enjoy. Today, we will be covering a case from my home country, South Africa. It was a case that one of my subscribers asked me to cover of his friend Rosemary Theron. So, let's dive in. In March 2013, an 18-year-old girl by the name of Phoenix Racing Cloud Theron walked into the Fish Hoek Police Station in Cape Town, South Africa. She told the officer behind the desk, "My mother has gone missing." She told the police that she had last seen her mother a few days prior on the 7th of March at 9 p.m. getting into a silver or white Mercedes-Benz with a man that she did not know. She told them that she had not seen her mother since. Her mother was 39-year-old Rosemary Theron. Rosemary Theron was born on 11 March 1973, and she was what most people would refer to as a free spirit, a hippie, or a nomad drifter. At the age of 20, in 1994, Rosemary welcomed her first daughter, and she named her Phoenix Theron, and they gave her the nickname of Racing Cloud, with her then husband Ivan. For most of Phoenix's early life, the family of three lived a nomadic lifestyle. They wanted to be off the grid as much as possible. They shunned the idea of living the suburban lifestyle with your average 9-to-5 job with a fixed address. They lived in a small caravan that they would travel in from festival to festival, but sometimes they would leave that behind and travel in a wooden horse-drawn carriage. Her parents made and sold hand-sewn puppets, which Rosemary was really good at the festivals to make money. And they would also sometimes camp in abandoned buildings and vehicles while traveling. Her parents enjoyed their nomadic lifestyle very much and were very much into the trance scene. They moved from one trance party to the next and attending what they called rainbow gatherings, where they and others would camp out in remote forests searching for a new view of the world with like-minded people. Of course, as many would say, with this lifestyle there was always the subculture of substance usage, most commonly including the use of cannabis and psychedelics, which the couple also partook in. This lifestyle they lived did not always make them the most attentive parents, as they both admitted to, but they did surround themselves with kind, loving, and caring people. Rosemary, or Rosie, as she was affectionately known, had a warm personality that instantly drew people in, and she made instant friendships that lasted throughout her whole life. People called her unconventional and creative, and one friend even said that she called herself Rosemary Lovemore Theron, because she just loved everyone and only wanted to see the best in people. She was a flawed person, but no one is perfect. When Phoenix was around 4 years old, her parents' relationship ended and her father moved out of the caravan and left her to stay with her mother, but he still saw her often. Rosemary and Phoenix moved into another caravan, but this time on a community farm in Knysna. This community had no forced structure, and there were no responsibilities assigned to anyone. There they would grow their own food and live off nature and meditate for hours at a time. This is the lifestyle that Rosie yearned for. She wanted more than anything to live freely on her own terms. This, according to Phoenix, also meant that Rosie would sometimes meditate for hours on end and often left her with a hungry tummy while she wasn't around. In the year 2000, when Phoenix was 5, almost 6, Rosemary decided to take a trip to South America, and she took Phoenix to stay with her father while she was away. During this period, Phoenix had a tiny bit more stable life with her father than she had with Rosemary, but not all that much. They would stay in an abandoned building that many others had also stayed in and sort of made into apartments for themselves. She said that her father would regularly have or attend parties, drink and take substances, and that she would always be around for this. And it was under the not-so-watchful eyes of her father that one of his friends sexually violated Phoenix. This would unfortunately not be the only time that little Phoenix is subjected to such heinous acts. At a later stage, her grandmother's boyfriend would also do the same thing to her. Phoenix stayed with her father around a year before Rosemary returned to South Africa, pregnant with a new baby on the way. And she wanted Phoenix to come and live with her again on the small holding in Knysna as they awaited the arrival of the new baby. The baby's father did not return to South Africa with Rosemary. He stayed in South America. Rosemary soon after gave birth to a baby boy, which she named Taki. And Rosemary decided to move her and her 2 children into an old abandoned bus in the Oudemolen Ecke village in Cape Town. This was a rustic piece of land near the city centre where there were abandoned buildings and horse paddocks that people would also live in. And the space was shared with a few low-key businesses and non-profit organizations. Rosie had started working as a clown, face painter and stilt walker at parties and events, and she also took some shifts as a bartender to earn a living. She quite enjoyed working as a performance artist, and she had become really good at it. Rosie fell pregnant for the 3rd time in 2005 when Phoenix was 11 and her brother was 4, and that she welcomed a second baby girl that she named Shariel. Phoenix said that it was soon after her sister's birth that Rosemary handed the tiny baby over to her to take care of so she could have a long nap. And she said that this was when the pattern began, where she had responsibilities far beyond her age of 11. The new baby's father was a crystal addict and would often have severe outbursts of anger, and his and Rosie's relationship did not last too long, as it was something that Rosie would not stand for. Phoenix said that she had to take care of the general well-being of her 2 younger siblings, whilst her mother continued her bohemian free-spirit lifestyle of either going to parties or working strange hours and attending gigs, and she basically had to take care of herself and all her siblings' needs. Phoenix had not really attended formal schooling by the age of 11. Her schooling had been a mix of homeschooling, self-schooling, and even no schooling at all. With the fact that they moved around often, or with her moving between her parents, any school or system that she would enter to would soon be interrupted by another move, and thus they focused more on the homeschooling system. She, however, yearned to be placed in a formal school system, but did not have much say in the matter. She did, however, later enroll in Fish Hoek High School, where they were by that time staying. It was in Phoenix's early teenage years that Rosemary married a man that was not the best fit for her family. This man also had an addiction to crystal, and their relationship soon grew toxic, and the kids would often witness both physical and emotional abuse, with Rosie also laying a complaint of DV against him at one point. Phoenix later made the decision to go and live with her father, where he was now staying in Knysna and working as a graphic designer. And at the age of 16 in grade 10, she was enrolled at Knysna High School. Here, staying with her father, she did not have much responsibilities. She had no younger siblings to take care of, and she started rebelling. She smoked, she drank, and she started using substances. And she was also having unprotected intercourse. It was during her last year of school that she started volunteering at leadership camps, at rape crisis centers and other NGOs that took food to people in the townships. She was also the editor of the school newspaper. With all of this going on, she still managed to pass matric with really good grades. She was also, not surprisingly, drawn to a very broken young man called Kyle Maspero. Kyle was 1 year younger than Phoenix and was also from a broken home. He had lost his mother when he was only 5 years old, and he temporarily lived with members of his extended family before being moved to another family member, and eventually he was moved into 2 different foster homes. He had during this time become addicted to crystal and was expelled from one school in 2011 after being caught using at school. He managed to find a place in another school, but there he committed theft on more than one occasion, more than likely to fund his habit, and he was again kicked out. This was when Kyle decided that he needed to get his life together, and he did a stint in rehab, where he managed to get clean, and after this he was accepted into yet another school. But there was a condition. He had to stay clean. And as you guessed it, he did not. He was caught again using at school and expelled. Kyle then ended up in his 3rd foster home. This foster family was good for Kyle. He was placed with a writer and his family in Knysna. This family did their best to help Kyle, and they really loved him and provided a stable home for him. This was when he was subjected to more of the arts, like drawing, writing, and taking photographs, and he was actually very good at it. They enrolled Kyle in a photography course where he thrived. He also started taking capoeira martial arts classes to help him focus. While staying with his family, he was again enrolled in another school. And while attending a leadership camp for that school, he met Phoenix. But this stability would not last all too long. He soon returned to his crystal addiction. After having been in a relationship for quite some time, in January 2013, Phoenix discovered that she was pregnant, and this made her feel like she wanted to move closer to her mom. Kyle told his family that he was going to stop going to school during his matric year and was going to work as a surf instructor in Meisenberg, and Phoenix would be working there as a shop assistant. He told them that he would take care of his own education. Of course, they tried to stop him, but he was adamant. Kyle's foster family were very sad, but they understood that Kyle loved Phoenix and wanted to be close to her. The couple decided that they would move in with Rosemary, who had now been staying in a house in Clovelly with Phoenix's 8-year-old sister. A year earlier, Rosemary had sent her son to live with his father in South America. Take note that this was a man that he hardly knew. Soon after the move, Phoenix made the decision to have her pregnancy terminated, but she and Kyle remained living with Rosemary and her sister. Rosemary was still making a living as a clown, face painter, and stilt walker, and she occasionally also worked on film sets and commercials as an actress. In March of 2013, Phoenix and Kyle had been living in the white rented house in Clovelly with Rosemary and her sister for about 2 months. 2 very tumultuous months. Fights had been a constant thing since they moved in. Kyle and Rosemary seemed to despise each other. Only a few weeks earlier, Rosemary had asked the couple to leave the house, and for a short while they lived on the mountainside in a tent. But they felt unsafe there and were also robbed of their belongings. They then, pride in pocket, went back to Rosemary and asked her whether they could stay with her again. But nothing seemed to have changed. Tensions were still there, and the fights were still constant. One morning the couple got up, as they usually did, by smoking a joint. But this was not enough to satisfy Kyle, and eventually he got up and went to the bathroom, closing the door behind him and lit up some crystal. Phoenix immediately knew that her mother would have something to say if she smelled it, as most of the fights started about Carl's crystal use. It was a given, as Rosemary had a traumatic experience with men in the past that used crystal. But Phoenix did not really care all too much about what her mother thought, and felt that her mother was in no position to judge them anyway, or make any comments about their substance usage, as she did many drugs in her past, with Phoenix there for quite a lot of it. Phoenix even said that she participated in some of the drug taking with her mother. Even though she said this to her mother on many occasions, Rosemary insisted that there was a big difference between the use of psychedelics or weed and the use of crystal when it came to distraction. She heard Carl going to the kitchen and followed. She called her little sister Shariel from her room, and they set out to make and eat some breakfast. After finishing their breakfast, they went back to their bedrooms, as they had nothing planned for the day, and they lit another joint. Again, this was not enough for Carl, and he set out to smoke some more crystal. This made him hyper-focused, and he decided to go back to the kitchen to clean. Phoenix then decided to also clean their bedroom, and her little sister was off playing in her own room. At some point, Rosemary came out of her bedroom and complained that they were making way too much noise as she was trying to sleep. She had a late gig the previous night and was tired. Carl turned around and thumped his hand on the table and snapped at her. "Oh, really? Says who? The person that is sleeping the day away while I try to clean this effed up kitchen." Rosemary told him, "It's my kitchen and it will only get dirty again when we eat later, so why bother?" To which he let out a loud growl and the argument continued. This heated exchange just reminded Rosie of how little she wanted this addict in her house and in her daughter's bed. Their argument grew louder and louder, and this drew the little 8-year-old out of her room and into the kitchen. She covered her ears, and tears began streaming down her face. Seeing this, Carl picked her up and took her to Phoenix. Phoenix hugged her little sister tight and desperately wished that their lives were different. She wished that her little sister could go to school and make friends, but instead she was homeschooled by Rosemary. She felt that her sister lacked social skills and that her cognitive development lagged behind those other kids of her age, and that some days she growled and acted like a monkey. So okay, just something from my side. She's 8. She plays make-believe, right? I don't really think acting like she's a monkey is all that wrong, but anyway, that's just my opinion. Right there and then, fired up, she decided that she would go to Rosemary's room and broach the subject of enrolling her sister in a school. Probably not the best time after your mother and your boyfriend just had a major fight, right? So she started off the conversation, and according to her, Rosemary just laughed at her and said, "She'll just run away from school like she did last year." This infuriated Phoenix, and another screaming match started between them, with her telling her mom that she was a bad mother. She said she then remembered how her mother had scared her about going to school, telling her that teachers were evil and that the other children at school were strange. She stormed back to her bedroom and told Kyle what a terrible mother Rosemary had been. They went out to the porch, lit another joint, and Kyle said, "It would actually be better if your mother wasn't around at all." While smoking, Phoenix started thinking about what Kyle had just said. And the more she thought about it, she told him, "You know what? You're right. I agree with you." Rosemary, meanwhile, was really upset by the words being thrown at her. It really brought her down, with Kyle and Phoenix constantly telling her what a bad mother she was, as if she was the child and they were the parents. She understood all too well that the way she lived her life was not normal or conventional, but she didn't understand why they were on her about it the whole time. She had been living this way for more than half of her life by this point. and she didn't feel the need to explain herself to them or anyone for that matter. She also started feeling like she had lost the daughter she knew since she started dating Carl. The new Phoenix that moved back in with her was sulky and obstinate. But Rosemary still loved her no matter what, but she did not know how to address the issues that they were having, as it always turned into a fight. She just wanted peace in her house, but she knew that Carl was bad news, and she had personal experience with men that were addicted to crystal, and she sensed anger in Carl, and she knew what that could lead to. Rosemary spent the afternoon getting ready for a gig she had with a friend, and informed Phoenix that she would have to take care of her sister for the night, as she would be back late. And they again got into another argument about her being a neglectful mother. Rosemary was grateful for her job though. Not only did it put food on the table, but it took her away from the tension of the house. And it was at these events that she had found her kindred spirits and her forever friends. After the end of a long busy day, Rosemary was extremely tired. She was keen to get home, and she got a lift home, and they dropped her off right outside of the house. She was exhausted, and when she opened the front gate, she could see the door of the house standing open. She saw Phoenix coming out from the front door and prepared herself for another screaming match. But she was extremely surprised when Phoenix walked towards her, wearing a smile. Phoenix then points out a star to her mom in the evening sky, and suddenly puts her arms around her mother in an affectionate hug and says, "I'm so sorry about all the fighting." Relief flooded through Rosemary, and her entire body relaxed. And she probably felt like they were finally making some progress. Little did she know what was truly going on. After their discussion earlier in the day about how much better it would be if Rosemary was gone, Phoenix and Carl decided that they would murder her. Yep, that's the conclusion that they came up with. Not any of the 100,000 other things they might have tried to make the situation better. Like, how was she such a bad person that she deserved to be murdered? I honestly don't know. The two then started making a plan. In between bouts of smoking the green herb, and in Carl's case, smoking some more crystal, Phoenix came up with the idea to hit her mom over the head with a shovel. But Carl thought that would be inhumane, and came up with the idea to strangle her instead. Of course, right? That is so much more humane. I mean, come on, you're discussing killing your own mother here. How is there any humane way to do that? I don't understand how these people think sometimes. Rosemary relaxed into Phoenix's hug, with no idea what was about to happen to her. Carl approached from behind with the rope in his hands, ready to put it around her neck, but loses his nerve. Phoenix picked up on his hesitancy and shot him a cold stare like, "What the F are you doing?" Phoenix hugs Rosie tighter, and Rosemary starts to say something when suddenly the rope chokes off her words. She cannot breathe and she begins to panic. With the rope around her neck, she begins to struggle, shocked and terrified, trying to get free, but Phoenix's hug turns into a vice grip, and she can't break free. Carl and Phoenix drag-walk Rosemary through the open door, into the house and into her bedroom. Rosemary keeps struggling and kicking her legs, trying to get herself free, but neither Phoenix nor Carl lets go. Phoenix holds her tightly as they fall onto Rosemary's bed, and Carl starts looking at Rosemary's face. Phoenix sees this and tells Carl, "Don't look at her face, look at me, and count off 4 minutes before you let go of the rope." He nods, and a little while later, Rosemary emits a huge sigh, to which Carl recoils. But Phoenix reassures him, "Don't worry, it's just the last of the trapped air in her lungs, leaving her body." And there on her bed, Rosemary lies completely still. The teenagers lock eyes and can't believe they actually went through with the plan. They leave Rosemary's body in the room and went to go check on her little sister to see if she might have woken up. Because yes, people, what she needs is more trauma in her life. Luckily, she was still lying in her bed, fast asleep, unaware that her mom has just blown out her last breath. They return to Rosemary's room and realize that they now have a body to deal with. Phoenix wanted to bury her immediately, but Carl was still shook up from what they had just done. So they each took a side of her and carried her out to the back garden. They put her in some black bin bags and put a large tarp over her that they had found in a storage cupboard and just left her there. And they talk about being more humane, right? Phoenix heads back inside after remembering that she saw some blood on Rosemary's bed that had come from her ear and starts cleaning it up. She wanted all traces of the crime gone as soon as possible. And Kyle decided to have another hit of crystal to try and calm his nerves. After that, they went to bed, with Phoenix soon falling asleep. But Kyle struggled. Later, her little sister crawled into bed with them, and Phoenix fell asleep next to her. Kyle was too wired to fall asleep, and he decided to continue his marathon of smoking crystal. Phoenix woke up the next morning, remembering what had happened the previous night. And again, she told Kyle that they needed to get rid of Rosemary's body. But Kyle, extremely high at this point, could not go through with it, and blamed the very windy weather that they were having that day. So they again left Rosemary's body outside in the back garden under the tarp. The day after, however, he could not use the same excuse. It was a nice warm day outside, and he had no choice but to give in to Phoenix. Kyle took a shovel and walked into a field not too far from the house and started digging a very shallow grave. They then wrapped Rosemary's body in a pink blanket and carried her to the hole that he dug. They lowered her body into the hole and covered it up with soil. On the 9th of March, Rosemary's friend arrived to their house to collect a banner that Rosemary was said to paint for her. She hadn't heard from Rosie in a few days, which was very strange, and none of her other friends had heard from her either. Her phone had been going straight to voicemail. The friend told the kids to report Rosemary as missing, but Phoenix said she didn't want any trouble with her mom. Eventually, the friend convinced them to go to the station to report her disappearance, which is when Phoenix then made the missing persons report, telling the police officer that her mother had left home around 9 p.m. on 7 March and got into a silver-white Mercedes-Benz with a man with long blonde hair, whom she did not know. She told police that her mom was wearing jeans, a faux leather waistcoat, a black top, and brown boots. Police went with that theory and scanned over CCTV footage for hours upon hours daily, looking for cars that matched the description. This led them to a man who denied having picked Rosie up for drinks. He stated that he had met Rosie in a fish and chips shop one day, whilst she was still wearing her clown makeup. He gave her a lift home and took down her number because he had a 5-year-old daughter and she was having a birthday soon, for which he wanted to hire Rosie. He tried calling her afterward, but did not manage to get hold of her. He also later went to her house, where a young girl came out and said that she had left and she might have gone to the Transkei. He gave his full cooperation and was soon ruled out as a suspect. They also investigated another man, a freelance travel journalist. They showed up to his house one day, showing him the missing poster. "Do you know her?" they asked. "Yes," he said, though he had only met her once before, when him and his girlfriend gave her a ride home. They showed him a photo of him driving Mercedes, with someone that might resemble Rosie in the passenger seat. That vehicle was a rental that was tracked back to his address. and was said to have been taken after Rosemary was last seen leaving the house, according to Phoenix. But in the days that followed, all suspicion was lifted from him after his whereabouts on that night were corroborated by several people. Again, another dead end for the police. News of Rosie's disappearance spread quickly by word of mouth and through missing posters that were soon circulated on social media. Everyone that knew Rosemary was getting more and more worried. They thought that she would definitely be back for her 40th birthday, a birthday that she shared with Sherry Hell on 11 March. They knew that she would at least phone home to wish her daughter a happy birthday. But that day came and went, and there was still no sign of Rosie anywhere. No one was able to reach her on her phone, and she also did not show up to any of her gigs that she had booked, which was very unlike her. But she would not just disappear and not tell anyone about it, and she would most definitely have someone look after her kids. She would not just leave them to fend for themselves. Several theories started doing the rounds that maybe Rosemary had been taken into a human trafficking trade, and others theorized that she might have been taken by a vengeful boyfriend. The police had investigated her ex, that she had been with for almost 5 years and recently broke up with, but that was also a dead end. Parallel to the police investigation, the search for Rosemary pulled in help from large numbers of friends and acquaintances. Her friends also got some psychics to try and see where she was, but they couldn't give them answers, although 2 of them said that she was no longer with us. Rosie's friends and the community raised money to help out the kids, as everyone felt sorry for them, with Phoenix and Kyle left having to take care of everything, as well as a little sister. People wanted to help out, and the 2 of them were of course cashing in on the situation. The money that they were making from their jobs had barely covered anything, and the police soon went out on social media asking for people to help them with donations for them to be able to pay rent and buy food. The people of Fish Hoek responded generously, collecting money and buying groceries for the poor, helpless, and bereft children. Phoenix also made sure that she dissed her mother on Facebook. She wanted everyone to know what a bad mother her mother was, that they left them so often and did not care about them. In a Facebook post she said, "I know my mom has often said that she will leave me with my sister when I turned 18 and go to France to be a mime or go somewhere else just as wild. She is a free spirit who was never shy to tell anyone that she didn't enjoy being a mother of 3 and that it was hard. She told me to my face that I shouldn't have children and that it ruined her life. So I am hoping, maybe naively, that she has finally let go of her bonds and gone to start her own life. At this point, even I wouldn't want to come back after everyone knew my secrets. I love my mom, and if she reads this, she must know she can come back and finish letting me help her become a better person. Mom, I already couldn't cope without you, and I have gone blind with stress and worry about you. But thank you for making me strong and preparing me for this by showing me how to look out for my sister my whole life. Now I venture into motherhood, and I can learn from your mistakes and your wisdom." This is just beyond sick. Playing the victim all the time. Maybe she might not have been the best mom, but still. Did she deserve to be murdered by her own daughter? Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Police investigated all possible avenues, but nothing led anywhere. Rosemary had taken none of her belongings with her, and her bank account remained untouched since her disappearance, and all of it pointed to one thing, that she was no longer alive. Rosemary's mom Denise, her sister Angelique, her brother Steve, and her close friends were gutted, and they refused to give up the search for Rosie. But they spoke about how well Phoenix and her little sister had been doing, and how strong Phoenix was being for her little sister. By August of 2013, hope seemed to have faded, and people stopped donating to the cause of finding Rosemary, which meant that Phoenix and Kyle also stopped getting help from the community. They then decided it was time to move on and decided to relocate to Gordons Bay, which was around 60 kilometers away from Fish Hoek. They began building a new life there. They rented a flat for themselves and her then 9-year-old little sister on the property of an acquaintance, Godfrey Skeepers. Shortly after completing the move, Phoenix had posted on Facebook again saying, "Hey Mom, we have moved to a beautiful new home that is so fancy. Shariel is blown away every day. She has her own swimming pool and her school is epic. We talk about you every day and pray for you wherever you are. Don't worry about us. We are happy and strong. You'll be happy to know that Shariel cleans her room every day on her own accord, and she even says please and thank you. And her teachers think she's the loveliest girl in the world. We love you." Phoenix still wanted to keep it out there that maybe her mom might have just up and left them and disappeared. She also seemed to have relaxed completely and thought that all eyes were off them and that the mystery of her mom's disappearance would never be solved. But Kyle was not so sure. He started worrying that someone would discover Rosemary's body. You know, the funny thing about this is that they buried her not even a kilometer away from the police station. And when you looked out from the window of the police station, you could even see the house that they had been living in at the time of Rosemary's murder. And the police had no idea that Rosemary had literally been right under their noses all the time. Imagine that. The total confidence these kids had in themselves is mind-blowing to me. Kyle somehow convinced Godfrey to help him move Rosemary from her initial grave to somewhere else that he felt would be more secure and the chances of her being found would be less. The two travelled back to Clovelly and went about removing Rosemary's body from its shallow grave. They loaded it into Godfrey's car and under the cover of darkness drove for around 15 kilometers along Baden-Powell Drive, which was a road that runs through some desolate landscape along Falls Bay. Along this route was the Strandfontein Pavilion, a beachfront leisure building that had been built in the 1980s, but mostly abandoned, in an area where you could easily hide a body for many years and it would never be found. It was not too far from the building that Kyle and Godfrey reburied Rosie, and Kyle was sure that this would definitely help them get away with murder. They returned back to Gordons Bay and set about their normal lives, with Kyle now feeling way more relaxed than he had before. Godfrey, however, could not shake off the guilt. He started writing in a journal and wrote down several things that Kyle had told him about the murder, as well as his own part in the whole thing. He thought that it might be cathartic and help him to move on, but he did quite the opposite when he looked at the words written down on paper. And by the 6th of September, around 6 months after Rosie's disappearance, Godfrey got up one morning and decided to get into his car, and he drove to the Fish Hoek Police Station, the same police station where Rosemary was reported as missing by Phoenix. He walked up to the police reception desk and said, "I have a confession to make." He went in to sit down and talk to an officer and spared no details, even handing them the notebook where he wrote down everything to corroborate his story. He told the police that he would cooperate in any aspect of the investigation going forward, and the first part to this was taking them to where they buried Rosemary. The police demarcated the area pointed out by Godfrey and started digging, and it wasn't long before they found Rosie. Rosemary had been buried for 6 months by this point, and it took around 5 more weeks for DNA results to be finalized to reveal that the body found was in fact that of Rosemary Theron. With Godfrey's story now locked tight, Phoenix, Theron, and Kyle Maspero was arrested and charged with murder. For many of Rosemary's friends, the fact that Rosemary's body had been found was at first a blessing, and they felt that she would finally be free. But the shock of discovering that her daughter had in fact been the one behind her murder would put a damper on any feelings of relief. Phoenix, Kyle, and Godfrey first appeared in the Simonstown Magistrate Court in early October, Phoenix and Kyle were the picture of two teenagers not giving a shit about the situation that they were in. Phoenix rested her head on Kyle's shoulder, and the two giggled continuously, clearly either unaware of what they were facing or simply not caring at all. Next to them in the dock sat a sullen-faced Godfrey Skeppers. Their case was rescheduled, and they made their second appearance in court a week later. Reality had clearly sunk in by this time. Kyle showed up in a t-shirt with holes in it, probably a tactic to make people feel sorry for him, and he only stared straight ahead. Phoenix wore a tracksuit top and was overcome with emotion. The two had by this time abandoned their bail applications. As they were led down from the dock back to the holding cells, Phoenix was holding onto Kyle's hand and she wept uncontrollably. Their trial was set to resume on 2 May 2014 to allow for more investigation to take place and evidence to be gathered. By this time, a few memorials had been held for Rosie, who had many close friends in various of the bohemian hippie communities all over Cape Town, where she had lived at different times in her life. People loved Rosie, and everyone that knew her or spoken to her had only good things to say about the type of person that she was, and that she had never been someone that had acted out of hatred or anger, and she simply wanted to live her life the way that she wanted. One of these memorials began on the grounds of the Oudtshoorn Eco Village, one day after Phoenix and Kyle stood giggling in the dock charged with murder. The site of the event was marked by a shrine draped in a red cloth to represent bloodshed and Mother Earth. In keeping with the way that she lived her life, they burned incense and played music. Those who knew her pitched tents along the area and settled in for a weekend-long commemoration of Rosie. Another memorial was held on Solar Beach in Plettenberg Bay, where Rosie's friends created an altar in the sand by drawing and decorating a big mandala and planting memorial flags around it. They also sang songs of love and life and meditated together in commemoration of their lost friend. It was also around this time that the family and some of Rosie's friends rallied around Phoenix and immediately tried to turn the blame to only Kyle, saying that he undoubtedly infected her mind with his power-hungry domination, and saying that she had and still was clearly under his spell. They stated that he was always with her and even answered questions for her, and that he had been taking control of the family as soon as they moved in with Rosemary.
It was in this house that Kyle Maspero allegedly strangled Rosemary Theron with the help of her own daughter, Phoenix. But it's up to the courts to get to the bottom of what actually happened that terrible night.
In March of 2014, Kyle was released on 3,000 Rand bail into the care of his foster family, after he claimed that he was violently assaulted and victimized in prison. The 2nd of May came around and Rosie's friends and family, as well as Kyle's family and members of the community, were settled into court, waiting for the trial to start. They wanted to see justice in action. But as soon as the court proceedings started, Phoenix's advocate stated that his 19-year-old client would be taking a plea bargain. It was a move that totally surprised not only Kyle's counsel, but Kyle himself. In this plea bargain, Phoenix pleaded guilty to murder and attempting to defeat the course of justice. Not only did Phoenix take a plea bargain, but she stated that she was ready to testify against Kyle, saying that he had been the mastermind behind her mother's murder. And it was during this statement, either wanting sympathy, mercy, or trying to mitigate what she did, that her advocate started reading out the details of her unconventional childhood of neglect, according to her. Now, we must understand here, in these cases, it's not like the dead can speak up for themselves and say, hey, that's not quite what happened. The accused would also do anything and say anything to try and mitigate what they had done. They would try and make their whole life seem worse than it actually was. I'm not saying that the things Phoenix said didn't happen, I'm just saying that sometimes people try and make things seem worse than they were if it benefits them, especially when you are on trial for murder. Think of the Nancy Kessel case that I did, and also another case is Jodi Arias. Phoenix was in turn sentenced to 20 years in prison, with 5 years suspended on condition that she did not carry out any violent crimes. So, for her mother's premeditated murder, she got only 15 years to be served in prison. The judge stated, "This is a very serious offense, the planned and premeditated murder of her mother. The sentence agreed upon is in my view just. This case is where she killed someone near and dear to her, her mother, and it will haunt her for the rest of her life." Godfrey subsequently had all charges against him withdrawn due to his participation in the investigation. Kyle appeared in court again in June, with his nearly grown-out hair looking much older than only 18, with the skin around his eyes sagging. Everyone expected him to plead, but in a surprise move by his counsel, they claimed that Kyle failed to recollect material aspects of the offense because of his heavy use of crystal over a long period of time, even before Rosie's murder. Thus, the judge ordered that he be sent to Valkenberg Psychiatric Hospital in Cape Town for an evaluation as soon as a bed had become available. And it was only in the following year of 2015 that a bed had in fact become available, and Kyle started his 30-day evaluation. A report was compiled, and it stated that Kyle was more than fit to stand trial for the murder, and he appeared in the dock again in October 2015. 2 years after his first court appearance with Phoenix and Godfrey. Kyle then also decided to take a plea bargain, in which he admitted to his part in the murder and detailed exactly how the murder and planning thereof had unfolded. His statement concluded with these words: "I have no excuse for my conduct and acknowledge same to be culpable." Kyle's plea bargain got him 18 years with 5 years suspended, so he would only serve 13 years behind bars. The judge said, "Were it not for your age, you would be the perfect candidate for life imprisonment." Kyle was by this time 20 years old, but he had still been a minor when the murder had been committed. Kyle sobbed in the dock and wiped his nose on his sleeve and asked for a glass of water, and the judge said to him, "I would also be crying if I was going to prison." I like this judge, very sassy. Some felt that justice had been served, and others felt that the sentences, particularly Kyle's, were not harsh enough. But to Rosemary's family, none of this mattered. She was gone. No matter what happened from here on out, she would never come back. They also stated that they had forgiven Phoenix, but they would never forgive Kyle. The trauma of Rosie's death was too hard for her mom to handle. She sank into a deep depression, and she needed treatment at a psychiatric hospital, as she was unable to cope with the loss of her daughter. But that would unfortunately not be the only tragedy that she would suffer. Rosemary's sister Angelique took her own life one Sunday afternoon not too long after finding out that Phoenix was the one to take her sister's life. A family friend broke the news to Phoenix in prison that her aunt had taken her own life, and Phoenix wept. By this time, Phoenix had been in prison for quite some time, and it was said that she was constantly crying, and it had become a way of her life. They said, "Phoenix just cries. She cries every single day. She's very upset. She realizes her actions and that it was the biggest mistake that she had ever made." As of 2022, Kyle and Phoenix are both serving their sentences in Pollsmoor prison. So that is it for today's case. I would absolutely love to hear your opinions on this one. Do you feel that she was just as culpable as he was, or do you think that she was manipulated and influenced by him, like she said? As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you had made it this far, I really do appreciate you so very much. And thanks again to Datura for suggesting this case. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Until next time, bye!